Have you ever stopped to think that true fulfillment and lasting peace are not found in possessions, achievements, or external success, but in what you carry within yourself? The Bible teaches us that, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Proverbs 4 verse 23. But what does it really mean to guard your heart? It means protecting your emotions, your thoughts, and your desires from everything that could take you away from what is pure and true. When we take care of our heart, we are actually connecting with the essence of our soul, with what God has placed most precious within us. Throughout life, we are tempted to seek happiness in places and things that, deep down, do not fill the emptiness we feel. The rush of everyday life, the pressure and demands of society make us believe that peace is always found in something outside of us. But Jesus taught us a different path. I have come that they may have life, and have it more abundantly. John 10 verse 10. This abundant life is not just a promise of material goods, but an inner transformation, a peace that transcends all understanding and fills us from the inside out. Today, I want to invite you to reflect on the importance of cultivating this peace in your heart. It is not an easy task, but it is a process that begins with the decision to allow God to be the guardian of your thoughts and feelings. By guarding your heart, you will become capable of facing life's challenges with a confidence that goes beyond situations. This is the key to a full life, full of true joy and steadfastness. The verse from Proverbs 4 verse 23 reveals a profound truth to us. The heart is the source of our life. But what does it mean, in practice, to guard your heart? Imagine that your heart is like a garden, and in it grow the emotions that you plant daily, thoughts, opinions, attitudes. If we do not take good care of this garden, allowing organic weeds such as anxiety, bitterness, and fear to take over, it will soon stop blooming. Guarding the heart, then, is like being the attentive caretaker of this inner space, taking care of what allows us to enter and grow within ourselves. The Bible teaches us that, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This means that what we value most, whether it's work, relationships, pleasures, or even worries, occupies the center of our being. When we allow fleeting or material things to become our main focus, our heart becomes misaligned with God's purposes. Guarding the heart, then, is about choosing wisely where we place our treasure, our priorities. However, this care is not just a matter of avoiding what is negative, but also of nurturing what is good and virtuous. Philippians 4 verse 8 instructs us to think of what is not true, noble, right, and pure. By doing so, we strengthen the heart to resist external pressures and attempts that might divert our path. Guarding the heart, then, is an ongoing act of vigilance and cultivation. It is an inner journey of alignment with God's will, allowing Him to be the center of our emotions, thoughts, and decisions. When the heart is well guarded, the peace and joy that come from God flow naturally into all areas of life. And it is precisely this balance that allows us to live a full and blessed life. The heart, although powerful, is also vulnerable. God protects us from many men, but there is one area that He entrusts to us, our own heart. The responsibility to guard it is ours, and this is because it is the center of our emotions, thoughts, and choices. Just as we do not allow just anyone to have access to our most precious possessions, we need to be careful with what we allow into our heart. This vulnerability makes it an easy target for negative influences, be they doubts, resentments, or attempts. Satan knows the importance of the heart and, therefore, tries to attack us precisely in this sensitive area. He instills feelings of distrust, fear, and insecurity, trying to distort the truth that God has planted in us. That is why we must be vigilant, not allowing these influences to gain ground. As Jesus said, "Watch and pray, so that you will not enter into temptation." This vigilance is one of the ways to guard our hearts, keeping us firm in our faith and trust in God. Sometimes, the things that contaminate our hearts are subtle, such as small unresolved hurts or offenses that we allow to grow inside us. These small wounds can turn into major spiritual barriers if we are not careful. When we allow feelings like these to grow, our hearts begin to suffer, and this affects our relationship with God and with others. Therefore, we must always be attentive to what is accumulating inside us. Guarding our hearts, then, is not just a matter of protecting ourselves from external influences, but also of taking care of what is already inside of us. We need to allow God to heal the wounded areas and renew us daily. Only then will we be truly prepared to face the traps and challenges that arise throughout life, keeping our hearts pure and strong. In our daily lives, Satan acts subtly, trying to use ordinary circumstances to distance us from God. Often, it is not great temptations that lead us astray, but small, seemingly harmless slips. A thoughtless word, a hasty judgment, a seemingly unimportant piece of gossip, all of these situations can become open doors for our hearts to become misaligned with God's will. It is precisely these small things that we need to be most vigilant about. The Apostle Paul warns us in Ephesians 6 verse 11 to put on the full armor of God, so that we can stand against the wiles of the enemy. These traps often appear in the form of distractions or feelings that, at first glance, seem normal. That feeling of envy when we see someone succeeding, the silent anger after an argument, or even the tiredness that makes us neglect our time for prayer and meditation. It is in these gaps that Satan acts, and that is why guarding our hearts requires constant attention. At home, at work, or in any environment, we face these temptations daily. The pressure to give in to selfish attitudes or to feed negative emotions is real, and this is where we need to be strong. When we guard our hearts, keeping them firm in divine truths, we create a barrier against these influences. As Jesus said in John 14 verse 30, "The prince of this world is coming, and he has no power over me." This is the level of protection we can achieve when we decide to lock our hearts away from things that do not come from God. Guarding our hearts means being aware of these little traps and, more than that, knowing how to face them. This involves prayer, discernment, and, above all, total surrender to God. When we allow Him to be the center of our lives, we can quickly identify what is trying to distance us from His presence, and then we can resist it more easily. When we decide to follow Christ, we make the decision to abandon certain behaviors and thoughts that are not in alignment with God's will. This act of renunciation is not easy, but it is essential for our spiritual growth. Jesus calls us to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow Him, Matthew 16 verse 24. This involves setting aside everything that stains our hearts, pride, anger, bitterness, and allowing God to purify and transform us day by day. However, this path requires constant vigilance, because the line between good and evil, between purity and defilement of the heart, is often thin. When we guard our hearts, we are not only protecting ourselves from external influences, but also from our own human inclinations. Pride can disguise itself as self-sufficiency, and anger can arise in moments of frustration, trying to justify attitudes that, deep down, we know are not right. This is when we need to be careful not to overstep the boundaries of what is just and good. The Apostle Paul warns us, "Therefore let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall." This reminds us that overconfidence can be a trap, and that we must always depend on God's grace to keep our hearts pure. Guarding our hearts also means recognizing our limits, knowing when it is time to stop, seek help, or surrender to divine correction. Humility is a fundamental component in this journey. We must remember that no matter how hard we fight to keep our hearts in tune with God, we are human and subject to failure. This is when vigilance becomes crucial so that we can quickly get back on the right path. By maintaining this attitude of vigilance and dependence on God, our hearts become a safe place, where temptations and deviations have no room to take root. And so, we continue on the journey of continuous transformation, guarding our hearts with wisdom and humility. When we dedicate ourselves to guarding our hearts, the reward we receive is invaluable. The peace that comes from God surrounds us in a way that the world cannot understand, and even in the midst of tribulations, we find security and serenity. This peace, mentioned in Philippians 4 verse 7, passes all understanding and guards not only our hearts, but also our minds in Christ Jesus. It is a tranquility that does not depend on external circumstances, but rather is born of the certainty that God is in control of everything. As we keep our hearts guarded and aligned with God's will, we experience a deeper connection with Him. We feel His presence guiding every decision, even in the small things of everyday life. This does not mean that we will not face challenges, but it does mean that we will have an inner strength that will keep us going no matter what. Jesus reminds us in Matthew 5 verse 8, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." A pure heart allows us to see God not only in the future, but in our daily lives, in our choices, in our relationships, and in the opportunities that arise. Guarding our hearts leads us to a life in harmony with God's purpose. We become more sensitive to God's will, more willing to hear His voice, and more inclined to live according to His principles. This attunement brings wonderful fruits to our lives, such as peace, joy, and the security of knowing that we are moving in the right direction. The reward also manifests itself in our relationships. A pure heart reflects kindness, compassion, and mercy, making us instruments of peace for others. The way we treat others becomes a reflection of what God is doing within us. And that is the true reward. Living a life in which the heart, guarded by God, becomes a source of blessings for ourselves and those around us. Now that we have reflected on the importance of guarding our hearts, it is time to bring this message into your life. Take a moment and think, what have you allowed into your heart lately? What thoughts or feelings have been cultivating within you? Perhaps they are small hurts, distractions, or worries that, little by little, are taking up space and distancing your heart from the peace and purity that God desires for you. Guarding our hearts is an act of wisdom and self-love. It is a daily choice to say no to what corrupts and yes to what edifies. By doing so, we not only protect our peace, but we also become able to hear God's voice in our lives more clearly. Jesus taught us that what is inside our hearts is what really matters, because that is where our actions and words flow. When our hearts are filled with good things, our lives are transformed and begin to reflect the light and will of God. The question remains, what do you need to block in order to keep your heart clean and in tune with God's purpose? Maybe it's time to release forgiveness, to let go of that worry that weighs you down, or to stop harboring certain thoughts that only bring anguish. Remember, above all else, guard your heart, for from it flow the springs of life. If this message spoke to you and inspired you to make changes, be sure to act. Take some time to reflect and pray, asking God for the wisdom and strength necessary to guard your heart from everything that tries to corrupt it. And, of course, share this message with someone who can also benefit from this reflection. Don't forget to like, follow, and share to continue receiving more messages that will help you walk ever closer to God. May this journey of transformation begin today, and may your heart always be a source of life and blessings.